afternoon, Wednesday evening, everyone. It is April 27th, 2022. We are about a little more than a week away from the great Maryland State GOP convention in fabulous, wonderful, beautiful Ocean City, Maryland. Today's guest tonight is Corine Frank, Executive Director of Maryland GOP. Take it away, guys.
He's so excited he can barely get the words out.
Well, the only reason we're having convention in Ocean City is because Dwight wills it.
He's got that overflowing suggestion box, right?
Yeah, they're all Dwight.
How are you doing, Corine, other than I'm sure running around trying to get all the details finalized?
We're doing really well. At this point, we've done quite a few conventions with the team that we have in place. So a lot of it is rinse, repeat. Having said that, there's always some new twists and turns, and this is a new venue for us. And we're doing things a little differently, as we were discussing backstage with the program and a few other little, things that'll pop up that give you a little bit of a different experience. But generally, it's going pretty well. And I know that you guys have been there, but it's the first time that I have hosted a convention at this location, and the first time that my team has done it. So, but yes, years and years ago, back, before Dwight had all those gray hairs, we may have had it.
You're going to force him to come and defend himself. I also saw,
I got gray hairs because Gil Davis said I didn't have gray hairs to run his campaign.
I also said, people are very concerned about things being even-handed around the party. And I've got some text messages who complain about that opening that we just did. And they're counting the number of Orioles shots to national attendance. And I don't know, I didn't count myself, but there's an allegation that we've overemphasized the Orioles in that opening.
I think we've underemphasized the pizza.
Anyway, on a more serious note, one of the things we've got a lot to talk about because, of course, we have a primary coming up in July, and we have a number of races that are suddenly much more competitive than they appeared to be even 2 months ago, particularly because of the change in redistricting. Can you talk a little bit about that, Corine?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were a couple of lawsuits contesting different maps around the state. The congressional maps were contested, and those were overturned. They went back to the drawing board. The General Assembly did not want to use the governor's maps, which certainly would have been the most fair that we believe that we could have found. But they certainly went on a similar drawing as the governor. They're very similar maps. They did help the Democrats in a couple of areas, but much better than the map that they were proposing, which would have taken Andy Harris's district and swung just into that very deep blue Annapolis area. Just to try to give themselves a little bit extra boost in his district. So what we have now is Andy Harris's district is firmly shored up. It's an R12, and it opens up District 6, which is now a D1, Districts 2, which is a D7, and Districts 3, which is a D9. So in a good swing year, all of those are potentially in play. That D1 is literally, a neck and neck race at this point. And in a good year, that is going to be a battleground district.
We've certainly in MoCo here been keeping eagle eyes on that race. And we got a lot of people who jumped in last minute or switched to that district last minute because everyone can see it, right? They smell David Trone's blood in the water for sure.
So does
well, can we just explain a little bit about the D1, D7? Because I think obviously that's a little wonky speak. I can explain it, but Corine, why don't you explain it for us as to what we're talking about when we talk about use those metrics?
Sure. A +1 or +7 rating is a PVI rating. It's a partisan voter index score. So if you win a race 52 to 48, that's a 4-point differential. So if we look at a D+1 in a normal even year, we would expect the Democrat to win by 1 point. So it's half a point on either side. It's a very, very, very close race. So when we add in the D7, I mean, normally a D7 in an average year would go to a Democrat. A D9 is a pretty difficult race. It would go to a Democrat. But what we're seeing is because we're watching all of the voter trends around the country right now. And let's take Virginia, for example, because it's got a similar makeup as Maryland. Biden won Virginia by 10 points over Trump. And then within a year, Glenn Youngkin won that by 3 points. So that's at least a 13-point swing. We've seen some modeling where we're going beyond 13 points because the longer Biden is in office, the more people want to vote Republican. So we're looking at anything within that range. I'm not going to tell you our exact range, but certainly it opens up a lot of potentially winnable races for us. And those congressional seats are certainly within potential winnable seats.
I would also argue the more the gas price goes up, the more people want to vote Republican, right? I think even like $7.50 gas could get us a Republican on the county council, cough, cough, Dwight, in Montgomery County.
If it gets past 7, I might run for president, so, you know.
Yeah. So I'm sure, I mean, this is something I've genuinely been interested in. What is the state party doing, if anything, in terms of modeling? Do we do any kind of polling? Because you see, all these polls that come out from Quinnipiac and other places like so-and-so candidate has X percent chance of winning. Obviously, right now, being pre-primary, everything is generic ballots, right? Republican candidate versus Democrat candidate. Have we done any kind of modeling as a party?
Yeah, absolutely. We've done a lot of modeling, but it's very, like you said, generic modeling. We're not, going candidate to candidate, which makes it very different. Because, for instance, all of the incumbent Democrats have built-in money and name ID. Right. So it will be a bit of a different beast than just a flat race. But what we do is we look at how this district has performed traditionally, what the rate of growth has been, how many Democrats have moved in, how many Republicans have moved in, what of their registration at the time it is now, and is that registration exponentially going Democrat, or is it slowing down, and what do we expect within the next couple of months? Traditionally, this would be a good registration year for us. And we are starting to see, I mean, we were hemorrhaging registration over the last couple of years. That has slowed significantly. So those are all good signs that things are starting to turn around. And hopefully within the next couple of months, we'll see some good growth there.
So do we have a strategy in play? Because that I really want to touch on that thing of registration, because I've had people reaching out to me saying, hey, we need to go camp out outside a gas station with a laptop and be like, hey, you want to change party affiliation? Because look at what you're paying for gas. Is that kind of the strategy you're seeing people coming up to you saying, how do we get people registered? I know that you guys have been hosting registration trainings across the state. So what's the strategy there, right? How do we reach out to those people who either switched to Dem or switched to unaffiliated following the last election and say, hey, now's the time to switch back since we have closed primaries?
Yeah, we registration is something that we're going to focus on. It's something that we have already started to advertise on Facebook and we're working on internally. We've always sort of looked at registration as, this is what we need to do. But when the registration numbers were just going the wrong way, you don't necessarily want to hand somebody a voter registration, right? So now's a great time to start pushing those ideas and pushing that voter registration technique. We are going to look at potentially doing something in May, a voter registration, door knocking, get out, Super Saturday-esque event. We're not totally sure how that's going to look. The other thing that we're definitely looking at is if you want to look at an easy way to tell people, oh, you don't like what's going on right now, go to vote.gop. It'll take you to a site and then it'll redirect you to the voter registration site in Maryland. So it's really easy to remember. We're working with the RNC for that landing page. And if you come to our convention, we have printed out several thousand QR codes so that you can have cards in your wallet. And when you go pay that gas, if somebody behind, next to you is kvetching about that, you can just hand them a card and be like, here, do what you gotta do.
Slap it right next to the I did that sticker, right?
There you go. Maybe we should do stickers. Oh wait, that's a great idea, Jackie.
We're coming up with all the good ideas on the show. This is how the sausage is made.
If you're listening right now, please put that order in.
Copyright, trademark.
QR codes, right? No, that's a great idea, and obviously some of the things that we can look at are people who have already moved one way or the other. If they move to Democrat to independent, they may want to keep on going. And so there's a class of people that we can reach through there. And then also some independents who may have moved away during the last administration that may want to reconsider and come back. So there's a possibility of kind of going after some of those independents too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a lot of things that we're doing. And like I said, I don't want to tell you everything that we're doing just
Sure.
because, some of it's sort of internal. But, we did run some texting at one point and some modeling. We're going to continue with some of the efforts that were successful, especially in Frederick County. We were really successful with that. And there's a couple of other ideas that we've capitalized on that have yielded some good results. I'll definitely let Dirk tell you about those at convention, maybe just not broadcast it, though.
Well, what we can do, we'll just present it, not that we're going to put this on YouTube, but that this is part of the secret sauce that you get by coming to the convention. So
this will be the first
Hey,
of the plugs. Buy your ticket. Dwight, I'm sure, has a link somewhere he can drop.
Right.
You have to buy it up to 3 days before, right? And they're going like
Yes.
hotcakes. I know a lot of people who are going.
May 2nd, Monday at 5 p.m. We are not taking any more registration after that point because the hotel has asked us to get it by this Friday. And I'm like, ooh, our folks can't get it by then. Can we just kick it out one more business day? So they're kind of giving us a favor. It will be down by 5 p.m. because I have to give it to them.
So help us out with some of the program that we have on Friday night and Saturday. Let's talk about some of the sponsorship and attendee attendance opportunities that you have.
Well, our hospitality suites are closed. Unfortunately, if you want to do a hospitality suite, that's sold out. If you want to do any sort of breakfast sponsorship, coffee sponsorship, or anything like that, you are welcome, and we'll definitely take your donation.
Actually, I was thinking of tickets to purchase. So I was actually trying to get to the reception with our regular direct line guest, Jim Gilmore. So
Sure. So
I understand that Jim Gilmore might be there. Is that correct?
That is correct. You have the inside track, Mark. Our good friend Dwight was kind enough to get Ambassador Gilmore to be our cocktail hour speaker. We'll have a fabulous cocktail hour. This restaurant is right on the beach. You can go outside. They have a nice fire put out there. It'll be lovely. I can't wait. It'll be, on the beach in Ocean City. Ambassador Gilmore will be our cocktail hour speaker. If you would like tickets, it's maryland.gop/convention. And then we are still working on our breakfast speaker. It is top secret, just absolutely top secret.
So, oh gosh, my question just went right out of. Oh yes, is there going to be another signature cocktail? Because I don't know how you're going to top that s'mores one from the show. That was my dinner.
Well, I would say after some of the after-hour shenanigans of our last convention, we might want to wait a few.
So you can see what an intense policy-oriented show Direct Line is.
These are the questions I want to know.
We really deal with the really important questions. So
you guys have been doing, going to these conventions for years. For somebody who's out there watching that they're considering making this their first convention. My first convention was 2019, right before the pandemic. Dwight made us stop before we left to get a tin of DoubleTree cookies. They are quite good. But yeah, if you're even you don't have to be a central committee member to go. I'm not on the central committee. It's such a good time to just see what the state party is all about, see what all the auxiliaries are all about, and just find a chance to leap in and get involved. And yeah, Dwight's listing all the places in Ocean City he's looking forward to eating at. So it's you can't pick a better spot, right?
There are some candidates or a candidate who says the way to reach voters in Maryland is to camp out at Ocean City, and that sooner or later everybody walks by at some particular time. And there's probably some truth to that. Now, could you come back to some of the races? Now, we talked about the D1 and the D7. Now, obviously, the state party doesn't take a position in primaries, and so it's up to candidates to run their own campaigns. But could you just tell us a little bit about some of the candidates who are running in these, frankly, more competitive congressional districts?
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to know about candidates in any particular district? Or
Well, let's start with 6.
Okay, so District 6, Neil Parrott is currently in that district. He's been campaigning for a while. As soon as it opened up, a couple more folks threw their hat in. We have Mariella Roca, we have Matt Foldy,
Sheriff Jenkins.
Jonathan Jenkins.
Yes,
Jonathan Jenkins. Yep.
He's been in it for a while. So that'll be a really tough primary, I think. I think it'll be exciting to watch, and it'll definitely be the race to look at. You know what I mean?
It's interesting. I'm doing a show on the other tomorrorow on MCTV, prepping on this, and what's interesting about the race with David Trone is that David Trone has collected a huge number of negatives over the years, and among Democrats, they're very familiar with the campaign that he ran in the primary in Congressional District 8, where Jamie Raskin ran against him and really kind of did a very effective job of drawing out some of the negatives that that Trone had in order for Raskin to win that primary. And then subsequently, David Trone ran in District 6. So my observation, that's really potentially a really interesting race to run. Even though Trone has a great deal of money, he also has this
a lot of skeletons.
A lot of skeletons is this history of a lot of baggage. But now, tell me about the other race, the D7 race.
The D7 race is Congressional District 2. That I don't even know all of the folks offhand who are in that race. The most newsworthy lately certainly was our own National Committee woman, Nicolene Ambrose, entering in that race. It certainly put a spotlight on that particular district. It is very interesting because it does just swoop right down into that small piece of Baltimore City, which was so fascinating. I did kind of wonder why they did that, and they picked her house right up in that little swoop. So
it was like an invitation for
really was.
We want you to run for Congress, right? And I think we had Bernie Flowers on a couple weeks ago, who's also running in that district.
Right.
Yep. There's a few others.
Now there's interesting because Dutch has been how can I say this gently? I don't think I can. Is an old style Marilyn Paul who has been around for forever and ever and ever and ever. Who's I think
stopped at old.
As long as Steny Hoyer.
Yeah, well, not as long as Steny Hoyer, and I get that. But Dutch is kind of like one of those guys who, after the election is over, they say, I didn't see that coming, but you know what? He was in quite a long time. But in many ways, Dutch is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot out of step with the current Democratic Party. And so we'll be seeing whether or not 20 years for Dutch, we'll see kind of if there's an enthusiasm gap among Democrats for his reelection.
So there's more to it than that, though. So remember, there's two things that I think people need to realize when they're looking at Republicans in these races. The first thing is these Democrats haven't had a competitive district sometimes ever. So they haven't had to run a real campaign. They don't know what it's like to run a campaign in a digital era. In some cases, frankly, they've never had to do it. They've never had to dip into their own war chest. They've never had to be very savvy about how they conduct their campaign. The other thing to remember is because they so gerrymandered the district previously, their district is vastly different. So while I talk about their innate name ID, it may not necessarily be to their new district. So that's another huge advantage that we have coming out of the gate as Republicans is they may have half of the folks that they campaigned to last couple of cycles are going to be gone. And reaching across to more Republican precincts right now is going to be really tough for a Democrat.
Absolutely. And I think I can recall there was a pretty notable article, I think, that Dutch lost two of his major areas that he was really fond of, right? I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it might have been like the naval base or something that he really held on to. And I think those are now in District 3, which is my segue into District 3 and talking about that one. See what I did
there? District 3 is slightly tougher when you look at number wise, but in the previous voting trends, I think they're pretty much equal, because you'll recall in 2014 we had a Republican county executive in Anne Arundel County, a Republican county executive in Howard County, and it picks up both of those areas pretty neatly. So I think they're both pretty even when winnable in a good year. And to be fair, it picks up some really great precincts in Anne Arundel County. So I think 3 is certainly extremely winnable as well. We have, I know Antonio Potoco has been there for a long time. He's been campaigning for a while there. Eurypsy Morgan recently joined that race. She's run for Congress once before. She had a radio show. So that's going to be very competitive. There are more in that district, and I'm blanking on who else, but those are the 2 that I'm sort of familiar with the most.
Yeah. So
Jackie.
No, so we have 3, and then plus Andy Harris is guaranteed in District 1. I mean, if we picked up all 3, I've been saying this for months now. I know Mark and Dwight have heard before that I don't think if we had the year that I'm fingers crossed think we're going to have, I don't think Maryland could be considered a blue state. I think we'd be solidly purple. But of course, then my question becomes, what is your advice for those other districts where obviously it's not nearly as winnable? So 5, 7, 8, and 4, right? Those districts. Obviously, I was like, we have some great candidates in all of them.
4, 5, 7, 8. So what I would suggest to them is in a place where, with Maryland, things are slow because there's such a disadvantage with the voter registration. So just understand that if you don't win your race, you should come back and campaign again and make more inroads with the next go around and raise more money the next time, because you will have that name ID going into it that you didn't have your first cycle. And it is 2 steps forward, 1 step back a lot of times in Maryland. And just, be honest with yourself on what you need to do to accomplish this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So just keep that in mind, keep perspective. And if you do really well and you look at the maps and you say, you know what, it's just not going to be a great year next time, run for something different, because you've got your name out there and you've got some experience at that point. So don't be married to the idea of this is the seat that I want. Look for opportunities in the districts you're in.
Right. And to that end, I mean, huge kudos to Chris Palumbi, who for the 2nd cycle in a row now is taking on Steny Hoyer.
Yeah. And he ran a great campaign last time. He really did a great job. His digital was really great. His video was really snappy. He did a great job. And I think he'll do another really solid push. And he's continuing to push back on that. So you may make ground up slowly, but if you keep going, let's say Steny Hoyer's out next cycle, right? Then
or out in a special election.
Yeah.
If he decides to step away from leadership, sure.
Yeah. So you have to create those opportunities for yourself, and some of it is opportunity that you create, and some of it's a little luck. But be in those areas and be the person that we're going to look to if something happens or if he backs out.
Absolutely.
I like to point out the career moves or the career history of both George Bush's, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. And one of the things they all 4 have in common is early in their career, they ran for Congress and lost, and then went on and obviously had much more successful for careers. So there's a lot to be said, as Corine was talking about, of being able to, run once and learn what you'll need to learn, and then be able to go on from there.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the other races, and let me shift gear a little bit. Is in Maryland, the school board elections are nonpartisan, but we've also seen that across the country, frustration with COVID and with obviously the CRT training effort, those races have really heated up. And it does seem that a lot more, again, nonpartisan, so it may be more centrist and to conservative candidates have been running. Can you comment on some of those trends?
I would love to.
So I would love when you said those words.
Yeah, school board is certainly a passion project of mine. When obviously I ran for school board last cycle, I was blessed enough to win. I'm here as the executive director, but certainly this is an area of interest for me personally. The last cycle, we really struggled to find people to run for Board of Education. We only had maybe 2 or 3 dozen Republican candidates who were willing to run. This cycle, we have over 100 candidates for school board races who are registered Republicans. That doesn't even include our sort of right-leaning unaffiliated folks. So the Maryland Republican Party supports any candidate who is a registered Republican in a race in Maryland. That includes nonpartisan. You are entitled to all of the same resources that a candidate in a partisan race will have. And we are happy to support you. I sent out a letter today outlining to all of the candidates in the House, the Senate, the county, and the Board of Education candidates. These are the resources that we offer you. You are all entitled to them. So we are certainly planning on getting these folks up and running and making sure that they run really smart campaigns and take back a lot of these school board seats. We are poised to do it. We certainly have the momentum on our side, and I'm really excited about those races. I think when we talk about these races are nonpartisan, yeah, but the issues are very partisan, and people are sick of it.
So something that I've learned in my time being involved in county politics and local politics here is a lot of people who are your rank and file voters, Jason Trott, a lot of people who are rank and file voters who aren't really plugged into the state party and how things are structured. They don't know what a central committee is. So they're receiving their primary ballot and they're saying, okay, I need to vote for a bunch of random people to serve on the central committee, but they don't know what that is. So how would you describe the role of central committee and what is your advice to those people who are running for central committees, especially those who are doing it for the first time?
So the first time I ran for central committee in 2018, at my very first speech, I said, I was on the PTA at the time and very interested in schools. I said, the central committee is quite a bit like the PTA. You raise money, you organize events, you support candidates, kids, whatever. Whatever the case may be for that particular organization. And it is really kind of, it's cutesy, but it is true. You do raise a lot of money for the party. You are there to support candidates. You're there to represent Republicans at events. Voter registration needs to be a focus. We had our build program. So it's really important for people to know that they need to come in and do this work, that this money doesn't raise itself, that you have to go out and find it and get it, and that these voter registration drives, that really is part of the responsibility of the county to participate in. The state party has a very small staff, but we do work very well with our partners in many counties. So if you're interested, start knocking on doors now and get used to it, and you will do well. But yeah, knocking on doors and texting is probably the easiest way to start off a campaign. Obviously, you're not going to want to raise enough money to do a mail piece for a central committee, but there are some small dollar things that you can do.
Yeah, but that's definitely, I think it's important for anyone who's watching who might not be plugged in to say, hey, what is this central committee thing I'm voting on? Who are these people? And because you see some counties where people are out there. I mean, I've seen Cross Ritchie and his vote for Cross Ritchie for central committee sign out there. And then you see other districts or other counties where they don't do as much campaigning on that end.
Now, Corine, a lot of voters, especially Republican voters, are deeply concerned about voter integrity. And so could you comment a little bit about what central committees do and how they can support making sure that elections are fair and what kind of role they might have?
Before we get to voter integrity, I just want to say, if there are people who are interested in what a central committee does, they should go to convention.
Well, that's a good point. Yes.
Yes. Buy your tickets by Monday at 5 o'clock.
Buy your tickets, and you too can see all of the super secret stuff that we do at convention, like bylaws. And a third vice chair race, which will be a little bit of extra excitement that we have. As far as voter integrity goes, Maryland is different than some states that we've had. we do have a majority of our Board of Elections who have been appointed by a Republican governor at this point. So we do control most of the county Board of Election sites. So it's not as dire of a predicament as I think some people think that it is.
Right.
But what we do need to do is we are a bit outnumbered when it comes to the election judges. And that's a really important thing that we should focus on. We should either, as Republicans, get our spouses and our parents or cousins or whatever involved and go up there and make sure that the process is observed and participate in that process. You do get paid for it. So it's not a total volunteer gig. But it also gives Republicans eyes and ears and a voice if something isn't right to raise those alarms and those flags. I'd say that's the most important piece of voter integrity that I could encourage people.
Yeah, and I know
the boards really do look for, in counties that are Democratic counties, they are frankly struggling to get Republican election judges and are really eager to see that kind of participation because they're required by law, aren't they, to have representation from both parties. So that's important as part of the whole process.
And you do not need to volunteer in your own county if you feel like, hey, I really actually want to see what's going on in Baltimore City, even though I live in wherever, Frederick, Ocean City, I'm going to go to Baltimore because that's where I think the action is. You can totally do that.
Yeah, and that's where we need it. We need it in counties where we're outnumbered. So, willing to travel is great. It does tend to be a lot of older senior citizens who participate in these roles. And we've noticed that they have really been nervous since COVID. And we did not have nearly enough election judges. That was part of the problem of the last and previous election is we didn't have enough judges to fill the sites. So hopefully that will start to turn around a little bit and we'll have more Republicans. I think this is a good cycle too because Republicans are really energized. So hopefully that'll translate to some excitement at the polls. Maybe they don't want to stand outside with a sign all day. You can go in the air conditioning and just sit down.
So on the other end of that spectrum, we're still seeing a lot of people, especially senior citizens, who are going to be relying on mail-in voting again this year. And I know, we've had some conversations, Mark and Dwight and I, and offline about how some people are already receiving ballots that they didn't request. And so what's your take on the whole situation with mail-in ballots this year?
I am not a fan. The mail-in ballots make this a much more difficult process. Essentially, if mail-in ballots start going out in June, you have to have your campaign, at a high point mid-May. So it makes it much more difficult for candidates. Additionally, I check in with the Board of Elections pretty frequently, especially because of all the changes that we've had. And I said to a couple folks, they can't move this election anywhere past July. The end of July is as late as they can go. And a couple of people said, oh, we used to have them in September. You can still have it. I'm like, no, it is a totally different experience now because you've got, 7 to 10 days of early voting. And then you've got, a couple of weeks of absentee ballots. I mean, it stretches the election process out so long. It's exhausting for candidates. It's exhausting for people trying to keep track of it. And frankly, it's exhausting for the State Board of Elections too, to try to keep up with it all.
Interesting philosophical question. I'm going to get your view and see if there's a state party position on it. Obviously, there are multiple ways in which to vote. We've referenced absentee or mail ballots. We've got early voting and voting on election day. Do you have a preference as to how voters should vote?
I might get yelled at. I don't know if this is a state party stance or just my own.
This is the Corine Frank stance.
Sure.
This is the Corine Frank stance. I would say, just anecdotally, I'll give you a story. I was at the poll last time around, and a really good Republican who was very helpful in some of the races that we had called me and said, Corine, I'm in the hospital. I'm not doing really well, and I'm probably going to be here a couple of days. And this is on election day. She said, can I send in my ballot? And I said, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you haven't sent it in by now, you're not going to be able to vote. And she said, well, I'm sick. I can't get to the poll. And I said, well, I can't help you with that. I'm really sorry. So just anecdotally, if you lock in your vote in advance, I think that that's the best way to go in case. I mean, what if you get it? I mean, I hate to say this, but what if you get in a car accident on the way to the poll and you just can't get there that day, or you get sick, or, you know, maybe the baby has a fever and you just can't make it out. There's any number of reasons why you may not. I mean, even if you've always voted in every election, you would hate to miss the one election where, you know, where maybe that was the 2-vote differential. So I would say it's always better to lock in your vote in advance, and then you can check to see if they've received it. So if they haven't,
it could be early voting too. It could be one of the ways you can lock it in.
Yeah, just to make sure that you get up there.
Yeah. No, I have to say there is. This is an interesting debate that folks have, because I do think Republicans tend to like to vote on Election Day. I think Dwight's passionate about that. But
you still get the sticker either way.
You still get the sticker, but there is an argument that says it's better to get it in, you know, in the box, get it in the bank, and then you can focus on getting other people to vote. But
I, for one, am very excited to get to vote in person for the first time in my life, because I've always had to vote absentee for New Jersey when I was in college, and then of course vote by mail during the pandemic. So this is an exciting year for me.
If Dwight had his way, you know, these poor people at the hospital would be dragging their
right gown open in the back.
Yes.
Yeah, really.
There is some thought too that asking people how they intend to vote, you know, which method do you intend to do, in getting that mental commitment from them. I'm going to do absentee, or I'm going to do early, or I'm going to do, at least helps you campaign to know, and creates kind of a psychological commitment on the part of the voter that, yeah, I'm going to do it, and this is how I'm going to do it. So folks are really encouraged to kind of think about that in advance and decide how they're going to do it. I will say, can I just share one thing? That one of my aspirations is that someday in the future, when inevitably I'm no longer with us, that I have already voted and my vote ends up being counted.
Even if you were already dead, someone would still vote with your name. So
anyway, that's a particular, that's a real morbid way of, anyway. Jackie, please change.
I'm just here for comedic relief. That's
yeah. You better step in and save this show right now.
No, I mean,
if you're buried in Baltimore, Mark, you can vote forever.
Thank you.
My dog is a former resident of Montgomery County, right? She's probably voting this year.
Right. Well, maybe we should ask about, and again, a lot of folks are very concerned about elections, and what can Republicans do to clean up the voter rolls? Because we do see, I know a lot of Republicans run into instances where there are people who are registered, continue to be registered to vote from a particular address, and they've long since moved on.
There's a couple of things that you can do. This is a really great project for our Republican clubs. When we look at, you know, what can clubs do? You can send out a birthday card or a welcome to the county, or a, invitation to an event, and anything that is return to sender, you can take that to the Board of Elections and say, hey, all of these people were bounced back. They no longer live there. You just bring it to the Board of Elections, and they will start the process. They can't really start the process until they have that. The other thing that we see a lot of times is if your child goes away to college and you're their parent, and then you say, well, I keep getting ballots and they haven't lived here in X amount of years. If you keep taking their mail,
right,
the post office will not realize that they have moved on. So you need to leave it in the mailbox, and you need to write on it, no longer lives here. And that's one way that an individual can clean up the voter rolls, but also just letting people know that these types of scenarios exist, and how to work within them, and how to make sure that people are following protocol and helping the Board of Elections if they need to. But the birthday card event, do that, man. You know, if you've got a project and you want to get some people together, that's what you should do. Just address envelopes all day long.
And then another way to do that also is the state party has a door knocking campaign sidekick application that we use, right? And is there a way that we can use when we're out knocking doors that information also helps to clean the voter rolls in a way, right?
I didn't know this is going to be a hostile show. Jeez. Yes.
Poor Corine is just black and blue from these tough questions.
So yes, we do offer Sidekick. We are still working with candidates. Yeah, we are still working with candidates to try to get up and running and get them into our Sidekick universe here. So what happens is once you knock doors, all of that data gets received by the RNC and their overarching, it's called data trust. And anything that's an RNC vendor, all of that gets collected and goes into the same sort of mothership dataverse. I don't know. I'm not a techie. And they try to clean up their voter rolls. What happens is if you have folks who are entering the data incorrectly on the ground, it really messes it up. So we need to make sure that folks are really well trained and that they're syncing when they need to sync, or they're entering it the way they need to enter. And that if they hit the door to a house, they're stating that not just, Joe was there, but all, or not just Joe was gone, but Joe and Mark and Jackie and Corinne, they're all living there, but they're all not home. And just try to be consistent with all the data that you enter. I forget what the rest of your question was.
No, that was it. Yeah. It's how do we as grassroots volunteers use the platform we're given to also help out cleaning up the data?
This is a real huge challenge. I was at an event today, and the reference was to the Obama campaign, which was 14 years ago, where they were at the absolute state of the art in terms of what technology was available. And the bar has continually increased as to how sophisticated the information is. And so it's good to hear the party is certainly keeping up with trying to keep things upgraded and move forward.
Yeah, and just a comment on that, the DNC at the time and the Obama campaign really leapt ahead technologically. That is no longer the case. Right. The RNC, actually, I would give the edge to the RNC right now on the techno wars. We have some really sophisticated modeling available. We work with the RNC pretty frequently on different portions of data. It just so happens that our data on the ground isn't great, but their technology at the top is. So it's a little, it's very much keeping up with the Joneses as far as the technology. But I would say we're not doing badly. We're doing pretty well. It's just frustrating when you get to these doors and, somebody entered the wrong thing, or, somebody moved and we didn't catch up with it yet.
Well, I'll throw a quick hypothetical scenario at you then as we come to the end of the show, which I actually am stealing from someone I saw on Facebook the other day. I don't remember who anymore, because it's crazy that, Facebook can tell me what clothes I want to buy before I even know I want to buy them. But, they can't tell me if the person at the door actually is the same person who lived there according to the app. So I saw someone out there like Elon Musk just bought Twitter. Maybe he should buy Dominion Voter and, voting or one of these other. If we get Musk to start writing an application.
Whoa, wait a second, Jackie. We don't want to get sued. We do not have the budget to defend ourselves on that. So just ixnay on that Dominion voting stuff.
To a more general hypothetical, do you see, as the technology advances, the opportunity for maybe not a big tech guru name like a Musk or a Bezos, but some very smart, maybe a Ryan Nidak 10 years from now, I don't know, to create some kind of smart data technology that is far more advanced and far more integrated and up to date than we're really relying on somebody to input the data correctly on their cell phone technology method that we're using now?
Can I respond? Because I really think it's an interesting point, though, which is that all of this technology goes back to that personal connection of a volunteer or a neighbor or a human being who directly interacts with a voter. And that's kind of old school, before television, before radio, but that's really kind of old school stuff. And there's it's hard to substitute for that. I get that, artificial intelligence can maybe guess some stuff, but I've talked to people who say, they look at their data and they've got that wrong. Talking to somebody is really, really important in politics.
Oh, I agree. I'm not saying, we should only be communicating via cell phone, but I'm saying the application, the technology that we're using, as far as it's come, still seems like it's light years behind the kind of technology that we see every day when we're being served ads on the internet. So
yeah,
I'm
as
curious where
soon
that
as the RNC can tap into your Siri, we can fix that.
Right. But yes, Dwight has very not so subtly told us we're in extra innings, so we do need to take this chance to wrap the show. Corinne, thank you so much for joining us. This is the last and final plug we'll give. Buy your tickets for Ocean City by Monday at 5. It's going to be an awesome time.
Hey, Corinne, can people take pictures with you next week in Ocean City?
Yes, they can take pictures, and we're going to have karaoke.
Hey, the return of karaoke.
That's good.
The return of the Garrett and Corinne duets that everyone
Only after the chairman's drink.
And Mark, as usual, thank you so much for
Thank you.
co-hosting with me, and Dwight for the color commentary this time too. And everyone will be back next Wednesday with another guest, another episode. I think we have, Matt Foldy next week, candidate for Congress in District 6. So thank you, everybody, and we'll be back next week.